The valet barely glanced at my car when I pulled up. That was the point. I didn't want attention. I stepped out in a black dress that fit well but said nothing. A silver bracelet from my grandmother on my wrist, and a small wrapped package in my hand. I had spent months tracking down that first edition Hemingway Dad's favorite. It felt like the right gesture, quiet, thoughtful, me. Inside the restaurant glowed with glass and gold. My heels clicked softly against marble as I approached the host stand. "Calla Everhart," I said. "I'm with the Everhart party." The hostess nodded politely and led me toward the private reception area. They were already there, Sabine, Jasper, Mom, and Dad. Sabine wore red like a challenge. Jasper's Rolex caught the chandelier's light. Dad looked thinner than I remembered, but his suit was sharper than ever. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, offering the gift. He hugged me briefly, eyes already scanning the room for someone more important. Mom's lips tightened. "Couldn't you have worn something festive?" Sabine took the gift from Dad's hands before he could open it. "What is this used book?" She squinted at the spine. "Vintage," I said. "First edition. He used to read it to us." Jasper laughed lightly. "Whole month's paycheck from the bookstore, huh?" The words stung more than I let show. I just smiled. Something like that. Sabine set the book on a side table unopened. "Well, we're contributing to Dad's golf trip to St. Andrews. But this is cute." Mom said nothing. Just smoothed her dress and looked through me. I stepped back, fingers still tingling from where I had held the wrapping. Behind them, I noticed a few unfamiliar men in tailored suits, greeting Dad warmly. Business contacts, potential clients. Definitely more important than me. When I was little, Dad used to say, "Character over cash, always." He'd tap my chest with one calloused finger and tell me that who I was mattered more than what I had. I believed him. Back then, he meant it. Those were the early years before the company took off, before Mom traded church potlucks for charity galas, and before Sabine and Jasper became walking resumes and designer suits. I was always different, sensitive, curious. While my siblings practiced debate tactics and polished their college applications, I curled up in corners with library books and asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. I wasn't trying to rebel. I just didn't fit the blueprint. Even when I followed the planned business degree from a decent school solid entry-level job at a tech firm, it was met with polite nods, not praise. No champagne, no dinner reservations, no framed diploma in the living room. Just, well, at least it's not the arts. 2 years in, I left. Quietly. The job drained me. It wasn't failure, it was survival. But to them, it was betrayal. Sabine asked if I was having a quarter-life crisis. Mom told her friends I was exploring non-traditional paths. Dad just stopped mentioning me when he talked about his kids. After that, I showed up at family events like someone's plus one, smiled when spoken to, kept my answers brief, stayed near the exits. It became easier that way. If I didn't expect warmth, I couldn't be disappointed when it never came. They stopped asking what I did for work. I stopped offering. It was a silent pact. And that's how I became the daughter who existed mostly in the past tense until tonight, when they decided I didn't even belong in the room. When I quit that corporate job, I didn't have a plan. Just a savings account, a notebook full of late-night ideas, and a deep sense that I was meant to build something that actually mattered. That something became MindBridge. I started it in the spare room of my apartment, fueled by too much caffeine and too many memories of the kids I used to tutor in college. Bright minds with broken access. I wanted to create tools for schools. Like theirs, places where outdated textbooks were the norm and personalized learning felt like a luxury. It started slow. Grants, freelance gigs, endless demo pitches. But the mission kept pulling me forward. And then in year 3, a pilot in Cleveland changed everything. Test scores jumped. Literacy rates improved. Word spread. 5 years later, MindBridge served districts in 17 states, had raised over $80 million in funding, and partnered with 3 national education nonprofits. But no one in my family knew. Officially, I worked part-time at Reader's Nook, a cozy indie bookstore in Cambridge. I stocked shelves, ran book clubs, and hosted local author nights. The job paid little, but the illusion was priceless. It let me walk through my family's judgment without revealing the armor underneath. Naomi thought I was insane. "You built an empire and hide behind a register," she said once over tea. "That's not humility, Cal. That's martyrdom." Maybe, I said. But if I tell them now, it'll just be about the money, the image. I need to know if they ever saw me when I had nothing to offer but myself. She didn't agree, but she understood. I told myself I was protecting my peace, testing their love. But deep down, I think I was still that kid with the book in her lap, waiting for someone in the room to notice she was worth listening to. And tonight, when Sabine rolled her eyes at my gift, and Jasper made jokes about my paycheck, I realized exactly where I stood in their hierarchy. I arrived 15 minutes early, just like always. Old habit from the early Mindbridge days: show up early, assess the room, prepare for whatever version of respect you might need to earn. The elevator doors opened directly into Alto's foyer, glass walls framing the Boston skyline in every direction. The air smelled faintly of citrus and cedar. Familiar, steadying. Ms. Everhart Sophia. The head hostess greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome back," I smiled. "Hi, Sophia. I'm here for a private event under Everhart for Silas." She glanced at the reservation list, then looked back up. "Of course. I didn't realize. This was your family's event?" "It is," I said quietly. "Sort of." She hesitated. "Would you like me to inform Mr. Ruiz you're here?" "No, please don't." "Actually, can I ask you and the team to keep things discreet tonight? My family doesn't know everything. I'd rather it stay that way." Sophia nodded slowly. "Of course, Ms. Everhart. We'll be subtle, thank you." I made my way to the lounge and ordered a sparkling water. Sat by the window, legs crossed, gift still in hand. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the skyline, gold fading into mauve. This view had always calmed me, soaring above the noise beyond expectation. Alto had hosted 3 of our charity events. Emmanuel Ruiz, the owner, had offered the space at a discount the first time. The next 2, he'd insisted on donating it completely. He said it was the least he could do. He had no idea how much that had meant. As I sat there breathing in quiet, preparing myself for another evening of smiling through condescension, I caught the reflection of a familiar figure in the glass. Sabine arriving. They swept in like royalty. Sabine in a crimson sheath dress with heels that could kill. Jasper in a tailored navy suit, laughing too loudly at something only he found funny. My mother, as always, was polished to perfection, Pearl's posture, and just enough perfume to make her presence linger. I stood as they approached. Calla Sabine said, air-kissing each cheek, "You look comfortable." "She's sticking with that minimalist aesthetic, clearly," Jasper added, eyes flicking from my shoes to the plain black dress. "Very bookstore chic." "Hello to you too," I said lightly. My mother gave me the kind of look that wasn't quite disappointment but carried all its weight. "You could have worn something brighter. It's a celebration." Dad followed behind them, distracted, shaking hands with a few men in suits I didn't recognize. I wasn't surprised he didn't greet me. We lingered awkwardly in the reception area while more guests trickled in. I tried to find a moment with Dad, but each time I stepped forward, someone intercepted him. Sabine filled the silence by telling a story about a recent court victory, gesturing broadly with a champagne flute she hadn't paid for. "The dining room is ready," the maitre d' announced, and everyone began to move. I fell in step behind the group. That's when Sabine turned around and blocked me with one arm. "Calla," she said softly, "maybe sit this one out. It's mostly Dad's clients. We're trying to keep the tone upscale." I blinked. "It's his birthday. That's why we don't want distractions." Jasper joined her. "I'll cover her dinner if that's the issue. Or we could grab her something from the bar menu." I looked past them toward the double doors where the rest of the group was disappearing. Then I looked down at my gift still unopened. I didn't move. Sabine's hand lingered on my arm a moment too long, her eyes daring me to push back. I didn't. I just stared at her until she gave a performative sigh and turned toward the dining room. My mother slid in beside me, then her voice a whisper laced with sugar and control. Calla, dear, maybe it's best if you just wait in the lounge. These clients of your father's are discerning. We can bring you some dessert later. She didn't meet my eyes when she said it. Are you serious? I asked, keeping my voice low. This isn't personal, she replied, gaze already drifting across the room. We just don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. I'm your daughter. She offered a brittle smile. Yes, and we're protecting you too. These people can be judgmental. Sabine had already slipped through the doors. Jasper gave a quick wink over his shoulder, like this was all one big family joke. A few nearby diners had turned to look, sensing the tension. My cheeks burned. My fingers tightened around the wrapped book I was still holding, crinkling the edges. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes. The hostess shifted awkwardly at her stand. A waiter paused mid-step. Even the maître d' hesitated, unsure whether to usher me in or step aside. Dad stood a few feet away, deep in conversation with two men in suits. He must have heard my name, or at least the silence. But he didn't turn, didn't glance over. He kept talking, nodding, laughing politely. I waited for him to say something, anything. He didn't. So I stood there, surrounded by people and completely invisible. I was still standing there, trying to decide whether to walk away or force my way in, when a voice behind me cut through the low hum of the dining room. Excuse me, miss, is there a problem here? A security guard in a pressed black uniform stepped forward, posture firm but polite. My mother turned toward him, all tight smiles and relief. No problem, she said quickly. My daughter was just leaving. I didn't move. The guard's eyes flicked to my face and something shifted. His expression softened. Ms. Everhart, he asked carefully. Yes, he straightened. Madam CEO, your usual table is always available. Would you prefer to dine in the executive lounge tonight? The silence that followed cracked like glass. My mother blinked. Excuse me. The maitre d' looked up sharply. The waiter who had been watching froze mid-step. And behind the glass doors, I saw Sabine pause in her seat mid-toast. Before I could respond, another voice joined in. Miss Everhart, the manager said as he hurried toward us, clearly flustered. We weren't informed you'd be joining this event. Is everything to your liking? Then Emmanuel appeared, crisp suit, and all moving through the crowd like he owned the place, except he didn't. I did, Stephanie, he beamed. Using the alias I'd reserved the space under. Had I known you were attending tonight, I'd have arranged the private balcony as usual. My mother's mouth opened. No sound came out. I wasn't planning to stay long, I said calmly. Emmanuel turned toward my family. Your daughter is one of our most valued patrons. She hosted our last charity gala here, raised over $2 million for inner-city schools. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, she also owns the building. Sabine's champagne flute slipped slightly in her hand. Jasper looked at me like I'd started speaking another language. Dad, finally noticing the stir, turned fully toward me for the first time all evening. The maitre d' returned quickly and bowed slightly. Ms. Everhart, the private room is ready whenever you are. Shall I escort you? My mother recovered faster than I expected. She stepped beside me, slipping her arm through mine, like we'd always been close. Darling, she said, voice tight with sweetness. Why didn't you say anything? We had no idea. That was the point, I replied, unhooking her arm gently. Inside the dining room, heads turned as I walked in, not behind the group, but beside the manager, who pulled out a chair at the center of the long table, right next to my father. Sabine blinked hard, then forced a bright smile. Well, now the party's complete. I was just telling everyone how hard you've always worked. Jasper added, seriously, Calla, we're proud of you. Really, the words felt hollow. Their eyes scanned the room like they were recalibrating their positions. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them, not because they were embarrassed, but because they couldn't see how transparent they'd become. My father hadn't spoken yet. He just looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. Not through me, at me. The first course was served. Conversations resumed, but softer now, gentler around the edges. As the server placed a crystal glass in front of me, my hand brushed the tablecloth. Smooth, expensive. a table they'd built to exclude me, one I now owned. And yet, even seated beside the man who once said I didn't belong, I couldn't help wondering whether any of them would have made room for me if they hadn't been forced to. The server cleared the appetizer plates as a lull settled over the table. No one spoke. No one seemed to know what to say to me. I let the silence stretch until it became too loud to ignore. Would I be sitting here, I said quietly, if the security guard hadn't recognized me? Forks stilled. Napkins froze mid-lap. My father turned his head slightly, but said nothing. Would any of you have invited me to this table? I continued. If you still thought I was just working at the bookstore. Calla, don't be dramatic, Sabine said, her voice thin. I'm not, I said. I'm being honest. And honestly, I've been invisible in this family for a long time. You only saw value when I fit the image you cared about. When I didn't, you stopped asking. Jasper shifted in his seat. We were just worried about you. No, I said. You were embarrassed by me. I turned to my father. Do you remember when I got published in that youth anthology at 12? You said you'd take the day off to come to the reading, but you didn't. Sabine got her early decision letter from Yale that morning, and everything else stopped mattering. His brow furrowed a flicker of memory, or maybe guilt crossing his face. I got straight A's for 4 years. No one mentioned it. I left my job because it was crushing me, and you all acted like I'd wasted your time. My mother's mouth opened, then closed again. I didn't tell you about Mindbridge because I needed to know if I mattered when I didn't look like your version of success. My voice didn't shake. My father set down his glass slowly. Calla, he said. Would you join me on the terrace for a moment, just the two of us? I nodded, standing as he did. And for once, no one tried to stop me. The terrace doors clicked shut behind us, sealing out the murmurs from the dining room. My father walked to the railing, hands resting on the edge-eyes, scanning the skyline like it might give him the words he didn't know how to find. I had a speech prepared for tonight, he said after a long pause, about legacy, about how far I'd come. He exhaled. It all feels hollow now. I waited. I stopped seeing you, Calla, he said, still facing the city. Somewhere along the way, I let ambition drown the part of me that used to care about things that weren't measurable. I'm sorry, I nodded, letting the words settle before answering. After your heart procedure last year, the one insurance wouldn't cover. I paid for it. He turned slowly, searching my face. That was you. I knew you wouldn't take it if I told you. His shoulders dropped. He looked older than he had all evening. Why? Because I still loved you, I said. Even when you didn't see me. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. No argument, no defense. I'd like to get to know you again, he said finally. As you are now. Not as I expected you to be. I studied his face. There was no performance left in it. I'm willing, I said, but I won't chase it. If we rebuild anything, it has to be real. No pretending. He nodded slowly. Real, he repeated. I took a step back toward the doors. Then let's start with this dinner. Come sit beside me, not as a CEO or a guest of honor or a business connection. Just as your daughter. He followed without hesitation. After dessert, the energy in the room shifted. Not exactly warm, just quieter. Less practiced. My mother found me in the hallway outside the restroom, her expression softer than I could remember. I didn't know, she said simply. About your company, about any of it. You didn't ask, I replied, not to wound her, but because it was the truth. She nodded slowly. When I was younger, I swore my children would never feel small. Not like I did growing up. But somewhere along the way, I thought making you impressive was the same as making you happy. It wasn't, I said. And I didn't need to be impressive. I needed to be seen. She reached for my hand, and for once she didn't have a script. Back at the table, Sabine watched me carefully. I used to think you just gave up, she said. But now? I don't know. You seem free. That's not something I feel a lot. Jasper chimed in from across the table, swirling the last of his wine. I haven't done one meaningful surgery in months. Just lips and cheekbones. He glanced down. It gets hollow. I took a breath. If you're serious about wanting to see what I've been building. Mindbridge is always open. Come visit. Not as critics, just as family. They both hesitated, then surprisingly nodded. For the first time in years, it felt like a door had opened that didn't need to be forced. I didn't know what they'd do with the invitation, but I had offered it freely. That was enough for now. 6 months later, everything was quieter and better. Dad launched a mentorship initiative for young entrepreneurs, something he said he wished he'd had when he was starting out. He called every week now sometimes just to ask what I was reading. Mom started volunteering at a youth center downtown. At first, she treated it like a chore. Now she tells me stories about the kids like they're her own. Sabine added pro bono education equity cases to her docket. She doesn't talk about them much, but I catch the shift in her voice when she does. Jasper reduced his cosmetic hours and started offering reconstructive work to trauma survivors. It feels like something I actually studied medicine for, he told me once before changing the subject. As for me, I stopped hiding. No more half-truths or protective covers. When I say what I do now, I do it without apology. We're not perfect. Some days feel like starting from scratch. But the difference is we're showing up as who we really are, not who we were pretending to be. And when I walk into Alto now, I don't need a title or a secret. I just take my seat at the table.